So now we will continue on with the process from the last couple lessons. So if you're not up to speed on where we're at, you may want to go back and look at the other lessons. In this lesson, we're going to look at setting up the inverse kinematics for this rig. And to catch you up, basically what we've done already is to create the skelegons in this rig and convert them into bones, and then also set up the weight maps in Modeler so that we would then have the ability to attach bones to weight maps within the model so that they're only controlling certain parts of the model. So in your scene editor, under property, if you go to bone influence, when you open up the bones, they're skelegons, they were, but now they're bones, you should see all of the weight maps on the right. So this is a good place to check those out. This is not the fastest place to set them up unless you've just got a couple you need to change over, but for the most part, what you want to do is select the bones here in the scene editor, and then use your bone properties panel to assign them. So there's a lot of bones when you get fingers, that's for sure. Anyway, you can see all these have been assigned. Whoops. Here on the right hand side, you can see them, all the names. But to get there, on the last lesson we didn't do all of them, but I had time to do that in between. But if you're still trying to get caught up in doing all that, remember the best way to do it is to select a group of bones. Let's say, for example, it was the left arm we were doing. We would want to grab all these bones here to select them. And there's quite a few since there's fingers involved. But I think this would be all of them. And then that lights up the entire left arm from the socket, the shoulder socket, all the way down to the fingertips on all of the fingers. And then we could assign those quickly. Instead of doing these one by one, we could do bone properties by going to bones and then hitting the P key for properties. We can then just go to the left arm column here, and boom, all of them will get assigned to that left arm all at once without having to do it one at a time. So anyway, just a quick way to get those weight maps set up if you haven't got that far yet. All right, so now we want to add inverse kinematics. So what is inverse kinematics? Inverse kinematics is the idea that you can puppeteer or control this rig via the extremities. So for example, we could grab the leg, or the foot, excuse me, and then that would move the leg. Or we could grab the hand and that would move the arm. So let's go ahead and walk through the process for setting that up, and hopefully we'll get it all done. So first off, we need handles to create an inverse kinematics rig. So what we use for that in Lightwave are null objects. You go to items, add null. What is a null object? Well, a null object is an invisible object that is just used to control various things in your scene, and bones are one of them. So immediately what you want to do when you're creating a null is to open up the edit button to access the additional data below. I'm going to go ahead and just call this right hand null. And you can call it right hand handle or whatever works for you, but just so I know this is a null object. So this is going to be the null object that controls the right arm. Now, by default, when you create a null object, let me just show you this. When you click OK, this is what a null object looks like. It's just this little star. And some people, for some purposes, love this, and that works great. I happen to think for controlling or puppeteering a character, this is a little bit too thin and faint and hard to see. So I'm going to erase that. I hit the minus key to get rid of it. I'll make another one. I'll go to items, null. Open up the edit menu again, and this time we'll give it the same name. This time I'll use a different shape. I'm going to go to shape instead of standard. I'm going to choose a box. I'm going to make it filled. Okay. So you can also choose colors if you want to make the box vary. So we can go to selected color. Let's go ahead and make that green. And then unselected color, we'll go ahead and make that so it stands out and doesn't get confused with the bones. Let's make it like a gold color. And that'll do it. You can also add a label. We can say, okay, right hand. We can change the justification of it, or we can just draw a line to a particular bone. This would be one of those situations where it would be great to have named all the bones, but I got a bit lazy and didn't do that. But you could have it draw a line to that as well. I'll go ahead and skip that part. We'll go with, let's see, my grid square size is 5 meters. 1 meter might be a little large. Let me just go with 0.5 meters. And we'll make it on the y-axis. That should do it. And we can reduce the opacity maybe by a little bit. Let's just go with like 80% opacity. What's the text color going to be? Oh, let's see. Why don't we make it yellow to match the unselected color? All right, we'll try that. Click OK. And there's our box. All right, so now, if that still is too big, and I think it is, I'm going to go ahead and modify. I'm going to modify size. Let's just scale it down a bit. That's better. Okay, I like that. All right, so now we can go ahead and leave that alone for now. But let me move on to the next step. I think it's better to do it. I'll come back to these null objects in just a moment. So in terms of the body, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding these little handles, like I said, to puppeteer the arms and legs. But Lightwave doesn't know how human bodies move. And first of all, it doesn't know if this is a human or an alien or a chicken or whatever. So we need to tell Lightwave that the legs are meant to bend a certain way. And we do that by going to keyframe 0 at the beginning of our movie and going ahead and just using our rotate tools to get these bones into place. So I'm going to go ahead and just rotate the leg so that the knee is bent like this. So I call this the driver's pose. And basically what's going on here, let's see, I've got a little bend there, which I don't want as well. Basically what's going on here is that we're putting this character in a position that looks like he's driving a car. So that way Lightwave knows that its knees are supposed to bend this way. And same with the arm. So I'm going to take the arm and put it down by its side. And let's check this in perspective view here. Put the lower arm forward. Again, so like the driver's pose, he's pretend like he's driving a car. He's got a steering wheel. Something like that. And all right, just check that look around. All right, that looks pretty good. So that's what I call the driver's seat pose. And it just tells Lightwave that the arms bend forward, the legs bend backwards like this, or underneath. And that should do it. All right. Let's go ahead and continue on with the null objects. And let's go ahead and make another one. Go to items, add null. This will be the left hand null. Actually, let me do my foot first, and then we'll go from there. So let's do right foot null. And I'll try a different shape this time just to show you some of the varieties here. So we go to standard, and we'll change that now to a ring. So again, we have the size, the filled option, and all the other goodies that we have at our disposal. So we'll go with, let's go with 0.5 again. And then I'm going to give this a label. So we'll call this right foot. We'll have a selected color and an unselected color. So we'll go and create, let's use the same colors just to be consistent. So I'll go selected color will be green. Unselected color gold. Oops. And text color, I'll make this green, a little bit different. And we'll drop the opacity down a bit. All right, so we've got the basic elements in play. Click OK, and there's our object. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and move it over here and then over by the foot. Okay, now let's say I change my mind. If I select the object and I go to properties, I can double click it here and edit those properties once again. So let's say the green on green isn't working for me. I'm going to change the text color to black. Click OK, and now it's just a little bit more legible. All right, and let's do the same thing with this one. And we'll change this to black also. All right, so what we're going to be doing is positioning these elements close to the wrist and to the ankle. Right there at the base of that ankle bone. And it's a little hard, as you can see. Perspective view lies to you, so I recommend you do this in a quad view. This way you can see quicker or more quickly what's happening. So if I zoom in a bit here, for example, and well, I can close this out now a bit here, I can start to get this lined up a lot faster. So there, it should be up taller and it should be over. So you can see this is much faster than doing it in perspective view and constantly changing your mind. So the right hand, I'll just move this over and then it should come up more forward, a little higher. That's pretty close. It doesn't have to be exact. It's not important, but just to let us know it's kind of where that's going. Now, there's a lot of settings involved in these null objects, so rather than just doing it all from scratch, you can copy these. So we can just select it, for example, and just duplicate it. We're going to go ahead and clone this. We're just going to go ahead and clone current item, say we want one or more of these, move this over, and of course, now it's not too useful to have it called right foot. Null 2, and so we want to change some of the properties, so we'll do that. So we'll come up and say, okay, well, this should be called left foot. Oops. Left foot. All right, and capitalize that. We can keep the colors the same, but we just want to change those labels so it is left foot. And now to change this, we're going to need to change the name as well. So that's not a problem. We can do that in the scene editor. Open up the scene editor. There is our right foot null 2, which is actually our left foot. We'll just manipulate and rename that to left. So that's just a little faster to do that, I think, than it is to go from scratch and do it all over again. So we'll do it again here, clone it, Only need one clone, move it over. The other nice thing about cloning it is that it already puts it close to the other ones. This makes it faster to set up. And so this will be the left hand. And also we need to change it in our scene editor. So we'll go to our right hand mill 2, manipulate that, rename it left. You can get rid of the 2 as well. It's not really number 2, is it? So same thing here. That's better. All right, close this out. And now we've got our little handles in place. So what we're going to be doing next is, I'm going to go back to use my perspective view. What we're going to be doing now is to tell Lightwave what we want these to control. So right now we have the handles, but they're not doing anything. So we go to the Setup tab first, and we want to make sure that Enable IK is turned off. That is short for Inverse Kinematics. I'll refer to it as IK from time to time, so just be aware IK means Inverse Kinematics. And this disables it temporarily while we set it up. So let's start with the upper body. We're going to start by clicking on the bone that gives birth to the arm, because we want the chain to involve the bones from the socket all the way down to the wrist. They're not going to involve the hand, and they're not going to involve the shoulder. So just these 3 bones, it's all going to be affected by IK. So in order for that to happen, we have to make sure that these bones do not influence the rest of the body. So we lock off the chain here at the chest. So we hit M for motion options, M as in Mary, M as in motion, M for motion options. All right, we're going to start by choosing unaffected by IK of descendants for this particular bone. So that we're not going to do anything else other than check this box. What we're doing by doing that is saying, okay, the IK, the inverse kinematics of the children, cannot affect the parent, so it will be locked. Otherwise, these would bend the chest. We don't want that. Next thing we do is hit the down arrow key to cycle down through our chain, which would bring us to the socket bone. And now we're going to start setting the controllers and limits. Controllers and limits. We go to controllers and we say under rotation, everything is going to be under rotation for this, that we need to set these parameters accordingly. So by default, these are all going to be set to keyframes. Keyframe, 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 meaning that this would be posed according to the keyframe positions that we create. But with inverse kinematics, we have to change that to allow it to control certain angles of rotation. So because we corrected gimbal lock, we have all of the angles of rotation available to us for this little socket. We have the heading, we have the bank, and the pitch, if you can see that in there. If not, let me just, there, now you can see it better. All right, so in this example, what I want to do is simply allow this socket bone to rotate on that red heading. That would allow it to go up, allow it to go down, probably not on the pitch or bank. So I'm just going to set the heading to inverse kinematics. That enables the red channel to work, but it will lock it down on the others. Now, if I decide later on that it's too restrictive and I want to open it up to more movement, then I can certainly go back to this window and change it anytime I want in the process. You're not locked into it. All right, so next I hit the down arrow key again. I look at the angles of rotation and I say, well, what do I want this to do? Do I want the arm to be able to flare out to the side or just up and down, frontwards and backwards? So I definitely would want the pitch, right? Because the pitch is going to allow that forwards and backwards motion. So let's start with that, inverse kinematics. And then by default, again, these would all be keyframes. But now do I want the heading to go out and allow it to flare up and down like that? Well, probably yes, if we're having a full range of motion. But let's leave it off for now. We'll come back to it. Now I'm going to hit the down arrow key again. And once more, all these would be under keyframes. So for you, that's what it will look like. But then I look at the rotation again. I say green, blue, and red. And I say, well, okay, what should this arm do? This arm should be able to, like my arm, it should be able to come up against the other arm, like I'm doing a bicep curl. But as far as it flaring out to the other side, that would be something that is controlled by this bone, not by this one. We wouldn't want that ability to completely flip out to the side, at least for most human beings probably. So let's go ahead and just put it on pitch only, inverse kinematics. Now that's the last of the 3 bones that are involved in this chain. The next step, we hit the down arrow key again, and it selects the first in basically all of these palm bones. So it doesn't matter which one really, but this one here, since it's the first, we'll use that. And now with that selected, we're going to go to IK and modifiers once again, but instead of checking this, we're going to go to the goal object, and we're going to set the goal object to the left hand null. So I go all the way down. Let me make this, put this up here so you can see better. I'm going to go all the way down to the left hand null. Left hand null, because that is the null object that we are wanting to assign as the controller. Okay, so by telling that bone to follow the left hand null, that's what's going to happen. So there we go, and now you can see the line has been drawn from the first bone in the series where it's blocked off all the way down to the handle, which is this yellow box. All right, so let's test it out. I want to go back now. I'm going to put this back to texture shaded. And whoops, don't need the wireframe. Now, let me zoom out a little bit. It's ready for action, but we need to do one more thing. We need to go to setup and make sure the enable IK is turned back on. So we turn this on to enable it. And now this handle is really handy because now I should be able to select it and move it. And there we go. So you can see that this left-hand null, which is now a box, is controlling, puppeteering this action. Okay, so as I move up, that's my range of motion. You can see that upper arm. You can also see the socket working, allowing for that little bit of push. Now, but look what happens when I go to the side. Nothing happens. You see it doesn't really, it crosses over here a little bit, but nothing. That's only because of that socket bone rotating. But the upper arm does not. So if I want more mobility with that, what I would need to do is go back to my controllers and limits, select that bone, and then change the rotation to heading as well. Because remember, heading is this red handle. So I can put that on inverse kinematics and see what that does. Now I'll go back to the null object, and now you can see it flares out to the side. Now this character is built to be very rubbery and cartoony looking. He's not a photorealistic human being, but you still get a sense that, you know, it's moving more or less like a person would. Okay. And so that's the process. Let me do it again over here, just so you're clear on it. So I'll do it a little bit faster this time, as usual. We're going to start with this bone here, and we're going to lock it off. So we're going to go to IK and modifiers, and this should be checked, unaffected by IK of descendants. I'm going to hit the down arrow key for this socket, and I'm going to choose the heading only, for it can go up and down, rotate it. Up higher, up low, go to controllers and limits, and set the heading from keyframe to inverse kinematics. The down arrow to cycle to the upper arm bone, and this time around I'll do the heading and pitch, set them both to inverse kinematics. There's the heading, there's the pitch. Down arrow again for the lower arm, it's going to be just the pitch only by itself. So okay, take it from keyframe to inverse kinematics. Finally hit the down arrow again to get my palm, and this time I'm going to choose the IK and modifiers. I'll choose the goal object would be the right hand null. So again, let me move this up so you can see what I'm doing. Right hand null. There it is, right hand. Now it's ready to go. I can test it out. by grabbing the null. And sure enough, it's got its range of motion there. Okay, so next up, we're ready for the legs. We'll go down. And in this case, things are a little bit easier because we don't have the legs connected to the spinal column. So the legs, which are the beginning of the IK chain, don't have any parents. And as a result, we don't need to worry about changing or modifying anything. We're good to go. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and start by just leave this alone completely. We'll skip the unaffected by IK of descendants option. We'll go right to controllers and limits and then look at the rotation. So I can see the heading rotation. Again, I can set this to vertices so you can see better. There's the heading, there's the pitch, there's the bank. Definitely would want heading and possibly pitch. So I can set both of these from keyframe to inverse kinematics, or I can just set one of them, like just the heading by itself, and make it a little more restrictive. So I'll try that first. Hit the down cycle arrow. I'm not going to do the bone spurs. They're not involved. They're just there to add volume to the kneecap. So the next one would be heading, because there's the red handle. You can see that's how the human body would work. So heading would be inverse kinematics. And then down again to the ankle, and this is the one like the palm, which is going to get assigned the goal object. So I go back to IK and modifiers and choose a goal object, in this case the left foot null. Left foot null as the goal. Oops, this list is so long it's just hard to fit it on the screen. Left foot null, there it is, left foot null. And now I can grab that disc and test it out and see, okay, you notice that when I move the disc, the foot goes along for the ride, and I can move it forward or backwards. There it goes. Pretty fluid, pretty smooth there. But if I come out to the side, once again, since I locked it out, it doesn't flare out to the side, just like I did with the arm. So if I want to change that, I can go back to controllers and limits, select this bone, and choose pitch inverse kinematics to allow it to flare out to the side. And there it goes. Okay, so now I've got a full range of motion. I'll do it once again. Start over here on this bone. I would go to directly to controllers and limits. Remember, we don't need the unaffected by IK. And we'll just go ahead and start setting this up. So inverse kinematics on the heading and on the pitch. Hit the downward arrow. Heading only for the lower leg. Downward arrow to the ankle, and then we assign this to the goal object, so which the goal object is going to be right foot null. Right foot null. There we go. And let's see. Looking good. Let's try moving it up and down. That seems to work okay. Backwards and forwards, side to side. Okay, so I'll put this back to texture shaded solid, and I'll just zoom out a little bit. Now we've got our inverse kinematics set up for this character, in which we could grab these handles at any point in time and move them to just make sure that when you grab something, you really are getting the handle. Remember that when the handle is selected, it'll turn green. If you miss it and you select a bone by mistake, it'll still be yellow. So that should tell you right away. And that's a nice feature to have to let you know exactly that it's been activated. So you know for a fact that you've got the right thing. So if you compare these shapes, you'll find that the discs are probably a little easier to select than the cubes are, but maybe the disc might get in the way of your visibility on the hand. So it really kind of comes down to your choices. I didn't choose these shapes for any other reason other than just to show you some examples. But if just choose the shapes, whether you like diamonds or circles or spheres, whatever you prefer. It really is your call. It's whatever works for you. So don't be thinking that I am limiting you to those shapes or those colors for that matter. It's really up to you how you want to go. But this will give you your IK setup, in which case you can go ahead and start to pose. And just to give you a sense of how this would work is you'd be keyframing the null object just so you understand. So if I was going to create an animation, I would be setting the playhead here and adjusting the null object to create that motion. You can see that is what's causing the leg to move. But remember that the other body parts are still going to behave the same way. So if he's going to move his head, that's a forward kinematic motion. So it's the good old-fashioned, rotating it this way. Same with the back, same with the feet. Even though the feet look like they are going along for the ride, they still need to be keyframed as far as if you want to change the toe or rotate the foot in any way. And of course the hand and the fingers, the same thing. All of these are controlled still through forward kinematics, through the opposite process where we're rotating them one at a time as opposed to using this chain. So that's basically the inverse kinematics fundamentals in Lightwave. And that pretty much wraps up what we need to do to get this character fully rigged with weight maps, bones, and IK.